What's up? What's up? Hip to the Games continues to put one foot in front of the other as I got some pretty good topics in store for you today. As I want to talk a lot more about the NBA playoffs since we last had our episode about that. Before I want to give some more updates on some of the things that I've been seeing as the first round series have kind of been underway and really rolling so far. I mean, there's just so much going on right now, right? Like the Warriors dynasty looks like it's over. Bron and KD are looking like they're about to be out the first round, and I think our inner preteen is having trouble processing that. I think the Mavs are actually out here playing defense. The Bucks can't stop Pascal Siakam, but they're also dealing with injuries to Giannis Antetokounmpo and now Damian Lillard. The Heat can still somehow beat Boston without Jimmy. I mean, it's just the first round, and all of this is happening. And then on the other side of the H2DG spectrum, it seems as though everybody has beef. If I'm honest, some of it has confused me. Like I don't even know where some of these beefs are originating from. Like it just seems like out of nowhere, everybody's just recording their songs and dropping their disses and whatnot. And I mean, it's just being incredible. Kendrick drops. Cole responds, then he takes it back. Simba sends shots at Cole, and then Kaz comes out and he responds to Simba in the effort to stick up for his boy, J. Cole, right? Then you got Rick Ross dissing Drake. Then Drake responds to Kendrick with the help of AI, and no, not Allen Iverson, AI in the form of Tupac and Snoop Dogg. So like, and then even on the side, we got Chris Brown and Quavo going at it. So yeah, lots of stuff going on in the NBA and in hip hop. And I'm gonna share my thoughts on it all. All right. So you already know how we do. Get your popcorn ready because when it's this jam-packed, you know you're in for a treat. Let's get it. Welcome to Hip to the Games, the podcast for you, the basketball junkie and the hip hop head. I'm your host, Desmond, and I too have had hoop dreams and enjoy the beautiful genre of hip hop and its history. Together, we will enjoy some of the greatest albums, songs, artists, players, moments, teams, and so much more, while even mixing the two on occasion, all in my hope that you remember why you love both or either of these to begin with. You'll soon understand that Hip to the Games is more than just a podcast, it's a lifestyle. And if you were looking for a platform that combines both basketball and hip hop, you've come to the right place. Welcome to another episode of Hip to the Games. Shout out to you if you are a loyal listener and are hip to the games. Thank you for your continued support. And if this is your first time listening to H2DG, welcome aboard. I'm happy to have you on here. If throughout this episode you like what you're hearing, be sure to hit that subscribe button or that follow button on whatever platform you're listening to or watching on right now to stay tapped in with all things hip to the games. And before we get into today's episode, though, you already know I got to get these shout outs out the way as well. The first one, always going to the creative director, Jesus Christ, for another H2DG episode. It's always a blessing and a privilege to get in front of this microphone and do what he's putting me to do. And then the second one always goes to my 19 Media Group family. All right, you see the blue and white logo in the corner, right? That's the home team. We got a tremendous group of independent podcasters, hardworking, passionate, independent podcasters, and we cover all things surrounding sports, music, culture, and everybody's doing some great work. And I think it's imperative that you follow 19M Group on Twitter, 19 Media Group on Instagram, 19 Media Group on YouTube to stay tapped in with everything going on in the network. Like I said, I always say I know there's a teammate of mine you can also support as well. And whether it's through likes, comments, reposts, listens, any of that kind of support is always felt and appreciated. All right, as up and coming podcasters, we really benefit from all that stuff. I know sometimes it may look like not so much, but it really does morally, and even just into the platforms that we have in itself. So all that support is appreciated. And keep in mind we all have merch available as well. I always put the link to my merch in the show notes. So every time you can go on there, you can scroll to the bottom, see represent the H2DG lifestyle, and you'll see the merch link right there. If you feel led to support in that way and rock your support for the podcast in that fashion. That's incredibly I'm incredibly appreciative of that as well. But with all those things out the way, we can really get into today's jam-packed episode. So if you are a returning listener, you already know how we get down, all right? But if you happen to be new to the show, this episode is going to be organized by the format that pays homage to the classic hip hop song structure, all right? I got three verses for you today, which represents three topics for the show. The first verse always sets the tone, you know that. So the middle one always brings the climax or rising action. And then by the time we get to the end, we got to have a haymaker. All right. Our third verse has got to be the best for last. And, since we always got to start verse one with a bang, I figured I let enough time go by. I'm sure some of you may have been waiting to hear my thoughts on this, but we're going to get right into it and address some of the competition and controversy going on in rap and hip hop right now. And a lot of that started with the J. Cole and Kendrick situation. The thing that I've been calling it as of recently, it seemed like the J. Cole and Kendrick thing has been a domino effect in terms of hip hop competition. So that's kind of where I'm going to start today's episode. Obviously in the recent month or so, Kendrick Lamar went viral for his verse on Future and Metro Boomin's song Like That, where he delivered a powerful, enforcing, bold, and competitive verse. It's hype, and I enjoyed it. It was one of those verses like I enjoyed it the more and more I listened to it. Again, I gotta admit, especially if you're new here, I don't really listen to much Future and some of the trap side of things, but at the same time, I like good verses, you know what I'm saying? And when everybody was tweeting about Kendrick Lamar, I had to tap in, and I dig it. I dig it. But of course, he made a big statement in that song. And the bars out of Kendrick's that really stood out were when he said, MF the big three, homie, is just big me. And a few lines down, even, he says, for all your dogs getting buried, that's a K with all these nines, he gonna see Pet Cemetery, right? K as in Kendrick, but also like K9, reference to dogs, but for all the dogs, right? For all your dogs getting buried, Drake's album, for all the dogs. Like, yeah, he went in. He went in that just one line. And, people went nuts when they heard those lines. People went nuts. And obviously, like I said, it's the big three reference, right? It is the reference to how he, J. Cole, Drake, they've been known, throughout the past decade as the top three in rap/slash hip hop. And I think that's important to note. Because mind you, it's been that way because all three of these guys have generally blended the hype, popularity, and hit making fruits that come from rap with their successful impact, substance, and skill that comes from hip hop. When you blend those two, you become so versatile that you are top dog in mainstream media and whatever you want to call that, right? And I think many rappers, we see many of our favorite rappers, right, usually specialize in one of those, right? They're either big on hits or they're big on substance, right? They usually don't do both. Um, but every now and then, we do get a duo or even a trio that finds a way to find success with both simultaneously. And that's what these guys have done throughout their careers. Again, H2DG is all about the fundamentals, so I did want to stress that point out the gate as well. Um, but there was that second line from Kendrick that I highlighted, right? As he took his jab at Cole and Drake a bit further, and he referenced Drake's album For All the Dogs, while understanding that Cole and Drake also collaborated on the big hit single off that album, right? First Person Shooter. So now everybody's anxious at this point to see how Cole and Drake take this, because in my eyes, personally, I was excited like everybody else. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, it wasn't even a diss, right? It wasn't beef. It wasn't even really a diss. It was a jab for sure. It was an uppercut to the chin for sure. It was a shot to the ribs, if you will, right? But to me, it was no different than what Kendrick did with Control back in 2013, right? Like, you spitting this fire verse and you just coming at people's necks and you letting them know like, hey, I got love for you, I got respect for you, but like, I'm top dog. Like, I feel like I'm next, right? So 11 years later, Kung Fu Kenny does it again, though this time his target was a little more narrow, right? Back then he was coming for everybody, right? He name dropped so many people in his verse in Control. Um, but this time he had his red dot sight on two individuals in particular, right? Guys that came up with him. And it's funny, everybody was saying, "Oh, we need competition back in hip hop." Yeah, this is what we need. And then, this verse kind of started a domino effect towards that, right? Like, because again, like everybody else, we never really seen Cole and Kendrick beef. Beef. Though they were always in the same conversations, right? They're always 1A, 1B, right? And they switch off sometimes, right? Depending on the feedback of the fans and whatnot. So this was their opportunity to go at it, right? All for the love of hip hop. No, like I said, I don't think this was gonna be beef. This was Kendrick saying, like, all right, I hear you talking big, Cole. I hear you and Drake saying y'all big as a Super Bowl, right? What about me though? I think I'm bigger than both of y'all combined. You know what I'm saying? I think there's nothing wrong with that. Um, so like I said, this was their moment to go at it. And it's why it was so disappointing that when J. Cole had released his Might Delete Later project, he included his response to Kendrick after a week or so, or something like that, right? Only to, pun intended, delete it later. Cole used his song 7 Minute Drill to fight back against Kendrick, using what he called warning shots, right? And it wasn't nothing too crazy, but enough to officially start their back and forth, right? And again, now the fans are hyped, like, oh, Cole came back, Cole came back. And I know some people, it had mixed reviews. Some people said it was whack, that the bars were light. Cole wasn't really spitting like that. And again, I think that's to his point. They were warning shots, right? He wasn't trying to go for the jugular, especially not while he's still trying to drop the fall off, right? But in this song 7 Minute Drill, Cole responded with lines like, "Oh, he's still doing shows, but fell off like The Simpsons. Your first ish was classic. Your last one was tragic. Your second one put dudes to sleep, but they gassed it. Your third ish was massive, and that was your prime." And these lines were in regard to Kendrick Lamar's discography, which raised a lot of eyebrows because Kendrick's second album, as we know, was To Pimp a Butterfly, arguably his best ever, one of his probably his most revered project. And so for Cole to say it put people to sleep was puzzling, very puzzling. In fact, when somebody sent those bars to me, and I instantly told them, like, I don't think Cole means this. I don't think he meant what he said. He was just replying for the sake of competitive spirit. Because I think if you were to go up to J. Cole and ask him, Jermaine, do you really believe To Pimp a Butterfly was a flop? Especially knowing what was everything going on, even in socially that year, right? With Ferguson and all those things, if I'm correct, with the year. And do you really think what Kendrick dropped was that bad, right? And I think, like I said, I didn't think Cole meant what he said, and I can get with him replying for the competitive spirit, right? And it kind of shows how great Kendrick is, because if Cole has to lie to himself to respond, that's kind of like you got to dock some points for that, right? Because it's like, if you're gonna come at Kendrick, at least try to be a bit more factual, right? Like, don't just pull it out of your butt and say things that aren't true, right? And especially things that you don't mean, as his peer who came up with him, right? And like I said, so that integrity and honesty was off-putting, especially coming from a guy like J. Cole. But then lo and behold, Cole felt the exact same way. Because what, like a day or two later, Cole is performing at one of his shows. I believe it was Dreamville Fest was going on. So he was performing one of the shows, and he tells the crowd, he takes a moment to say, like, yo, that was whack of me to do. I put that out and instantly felt off in my spirit. And so I'm going to delete the song. All love to Kendrick. I don't want to do this any further. Like, boom, squash it. Whoa. Now people are ticked, right? Because unfortunately, we aren't used to peace in hip hop/rap. And I don't even mean violence when I say that. I just mean when beefs happen, you do your homework, you make a shattering diss, and you stand on your word. That is the process. Whether your diss absolutely flops or not, you stand on your word. Apologizing is whack, right? You shake hands after the fight, right? You don't throw in the towel. You spar, you box, you duke it out, and then you shake hands, right? In the ring, it's supposed to be all smoke. So that's where the sport of hip hop comes into play. And, spectators want to see their artist win. So for J. Cole to kind of stop that from happening, it had people upset, and rightfully so. So when Cole does this, it's met with a lot of bad reviews. Some people said they lost respect for Cole. Some people went as far as saying, "Oh, he's preparing for the fall off by literally falling off." I mean, just everything. And like I said in the intro, you even had a guy like Simba make a freestyle where he essentially is kind of giving his mini State of the Union on hip hop in regards to this situation going on, and basically saying that Cole, what he did was weak, and it's not the kind of hip hop we came up loving, right? Which made Dreamville artist Kaz make his response defending his boy, which was funny because again, notice what's happening, right? It's going back to the thing people wanted in the first place, competition. It may not be Kendrick and Cole, but now everybody's chiming in on what they're seeing right here, and it's creating competition. You know, even Cole doing the least popular thing, right? The frowned upon thing ushered in a rush of competition. I thought that was interesting. I thought that was interesting. But I want to continue on this topic in a bit, but wanted to give, before that, I wanted to give my thoughts on uh Cole backing out of the dissing. Because out of all the tweets and the videos I've seen of people sharing their genuine thoughts, there were only two people, well, technically three that I follow, but really two people that in my opinion hit the nail on the head. And they were Charlemagne the God, I know, right? Um, a former pastor of Embassy City Church. He has his podcast now called The Basement. Tim Ross, who also happens to be a hip hop head, and he's a former battle rapper. He's been vocal about that, so he knows what goes into that. And then an MC from Kentucky named Divine Karama, someone who I've seen dominate over the years in the 4 Bar Friday community. Damian Lillard's Instagram challenge that I've talked about on this podcast before. A community that I've been a part of and whatnot. And this guy is a fantastic MC, stand-up gentleman, man of God, just does a lot of community work in his area, like a real great dude. And these three guys were ones who I felt like really hit the nail on the head in this situation, because all of these men stressed my initial thoughts regarding change behavior. It's funny, both Charlemagne and Tim Ross compared Cole's maturity that he showed to make this decision to the maturity that Jay-Z displayed on 444. It takes maturity to come from Big Pimpin' to 444, right? I think there should be a dissertation on that solely out of Jay-Z's career, how he came from Big Pimpin' to 444. You know what I'm saying? Uh, hug him, leave him, I don't need him, to apologizing on an album, right? Expressing his devotion to his wife, right? It takes maturity to apologize to your wife on an album and be like, no cover up, no bull, I was wrong, right? And similarly, I think it takes maturity for J. Cole to back away from his bars. Again, something frowned upon in hip hop. J. Cole is facing embarrassment and ridicule and commentary left and right when he does this, but he still stood on his conviction. Um, to me, that is the definition of strength. And I know strength, especially as men, is there's always opinions about what that looks like. But to me, that is the epitome of strength. And again, I think a lot of what I'm going to say might be unpopular, but I don't care, right? Show me a man that is mature enough and disciplined enough to follow his convictions, and I'll show you a strong man. Strength that has nothing to do with the physical. People didn't get that part. I felt like that went right over people's heads. In their love for hip hop, they lost a little bit of that. Um, Men especially, right? I think they got their hands in a bunch simply because Cole did the soft thing. He probably did the wise thing, but it's the soft thing. It's a reminder that as men, sometimes we show the most strength when we do something that changes the way people have come to see men, if that makes sense. Our brains are always saying, fight back, show your dominance, right? But what ultimately shows more strength? Let me ask you this. What shows more strength? You punching a dude simply because you ain't like what he said, or choosing wisdom and peace to process the situation maturely? What takes more strength in that moment? To choose the hard right or the easy wrong? How many men out here have regrets with how they handled situations simply because they chose the perception of a man as opposed to the reality of man, right? They cared about the perception. They cared about what they would look like to others. They cared that they would look macho over actually being macho up here. Let me paint it this way too. Because this was another thing that I thought of when I first saw Cole lay down his weapon, if you will. I'm sure Cole sat with himself that day and pictured Tupac and Biggie, right? Two of our beloved giants in hip hop, former friends turned foes, top of the mountain. Pac, Biggie, right? I feel like he saw them. Where would they be if they expressed the maturity to squash their beef instead of ignite it? What am I really doing for hip hop if I'm just following the same patterns that they did? Is that really changing the game for good? Are we really learning from what happened? Or are we just trying to see it again because we love competition? Like, nah, I gotta end this. Now, granted, there was a don't miss what I'm saying. Was an extremely slim chance Kendrick versus Cole was gonna go to the lengths Pac and Biggie did. Like I said, this was nothing violent. And besides, there's been other beefs in hip hop that were squashed, right? For example, Common and Ice Cube, right? They have their moment, they squash it, and it's cool. It don't always gotta be jugular. It don't always gotta be violence, right? I think sometimes we gotta stop thinking that when it comes to beef. Um, I just genuinely believe like this was far from personal. Like I said, don't confuse J. Cole standing on his conviction for him thinking like that it was going to go too far or something like that. Right? Like I felt like what Cole was feeling on the inside was a lot deeper than just hip hop competition. It was recognizing that his words have power. It was recognizing, again, this is something Tim Ross mentioned as well. The Bible says, right, to live peaceably with all men, right? All people. That's what Cole chose. It did not feel right for him to attack his brother, essentially, right, in Kendrick Lamar. Because the fans, right, they want to go hype because they're exchanging blows. And again, I get it. The sport of hip hop, right? That is fine. There is nothing with exchanging bars and punchlines and I'm better than you and you're this, you're that, like I'm top dog. Like all that is cool. But at the end of the day, the way Cole did it, this is the result of that. You can't be I don't think you could be upset with that. Um, you know, but again, I do, like I said, I do see that other side, right? It hurts the competitive aspect of hip hop that we've come to love because again, a lot like what I heard from Divine Karama, he made a great point in saying like, yo, the decision Cole made as a human, as a man, was awesome. That's dope. But the fact that this is the same J. Cole who's so braggadocious, always ready for smoke, now he wants to back away. Right? It comes off like ironic or hypocritical. And I totally agree with that part too, because, Cole also had the chance to have one of the dopest moments in hip hop with Kendrick, right? Look, how dope would this have been to see our two giants just friendly sparring for a month or so, right? Two elite MCs going at it, strictly competitive, no violence, no games, just bars. And now when Cole drops the fall off and has these competitive bars, which I'm sure is gonna come, people are gonna look at him funny because you didn't stand on that when you really could have. When you call yourself Muhammad Ali, you didn't show up as him. You know, like no diss, but like you call yourself Muhammad Ali, now you're showing up Sonny Liston. So it's the guy who seemingly has lyrical smoke for everybody. And then when top dog, pun intended, right? Top dog Kendrick Lamar comes for you, now you back away. Like that's the part that hurts. That's the part that hurts. So just to summarize, I think Cole did an extremely undervalued thing for hip hop and men because we dwell in such sensitive fleshly bodies. Like this world is not used to choosing conviction. We want to clap back. We want what we desire. It's hard. And those of us who follow God, who have the spiritual eyes to see that, get that and understand the value in choosing conviction, right? So to think Cole, who even expressed in the offseason, right? If you listen to that album, you I forget which song it was specifically, but he mentioned that he was dabbling in different religions. For him, for him to follow his personal conviction in that way while still figuring out what his spiritual walk looks like is a powerful, powerful, strong thing to do. I commend him for exercising the kind of faith and self control it takes to follow conviction, even when he isn't sure what his faith journey looks like yet, especially doing this in the public eye where you're just bound to, it's bound to come with scrutiny, right? And again, I say, peace is unpopular. It's the thing everybody yearns for, yet struggles to choose. The duality of man. It's the thing everybody wants peace, and then in the heat of the moment, we struggle to choose it. And then so when somebody does choose it, it's so off-putting. We're so not used to doing it, it becomes off-putting. And Cole exercised strength and weakness by doing this. And who does that sound like? Hmm. Strength and weakness. If you got the eyes to see, that little moment he displayed was bigger than hip hop. Like I said, think and to think like me, I'm speaking as, again, I say this often, right? Cole, Kendrick, Drake, so many MCs, right, are like our big brothers. If you're in your mid 20s, these rappers who are in their mid 30s, they were our big brothers. So like again, like I always say, when I was like 12 years old and I'm hearing J. Cole and Logic and all these cats, you can even say like Blue, right? Blue in Exile, like saying that I want to make it, I want to make it, I want to make it, right? Now they have made it, and now we're still looking up to them in the sense of like, okay, they made it. It shows me that it's possible, right? So in that, with that same big brother energy in mind, I'm looking at this as a 25-year-old, like, yo, like, look how Cole did the unpopular thing. Look at how Cole chose peace in the arena of hip hop that doesn't always do that. It may do it eventually, but it darn sure doesn't do it as fast as J. Cole did. Him doing something different, it struck a chord with me, right? And again, I'm not sitting here saying we should eliminate sport and hip hop. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any more beefs. What I am saying though is that it's really cool to see somebody of his ilk and fame and whatnot, you know, put his pride aside and say, you know what, I don't want to go through this. I don't want to continue with this. I got too much respect for Kendrick Lamar to continue with this. Even if it was just playful beef, it was something he felt in his heart he didn't want to do, and he followed that. He didn't let the opinion of hip hop fans, I don't care how much, I don't care what boom box you got in your room and how many posters you got, how many vinyls you got. J. Cole didn't do it for you. He did it for himself. And that's what I respect. Heavy. Like I said, looking again, continuing to look up to the hip hop has always been a bigger brother, and J. Cole really did a big brother thing right here. And I hope that doesn't get lost on people. Um, I think what Cole did, somebody peeped what Cole did and was inspired to do something similar. Like I said, on some life stuff, that was dope. I know that's unpopular, right? But again, I don't care. I don't care. Like, I got mad respect for what Cole did, even if it means I don't get to see a battle between two of the top MCs of my generation, right? Again, two things can be true. If you take anything from what I'm saying, two things can be true. I can be proud of Cole's maturity, and the hip hop fan in me can grieve a little bit of what could have been. It's okay. Two things can be true. Clearly competition is alive and well. It seems like everybody's going at Drake now. Drake even poked fun at Kendrick in his response. at the end of his song saying, he better have a quintuple entendre ready for him. Like, I can't help but believe Kendrick laughed out loud when he heard that. Right? Like these guys, like I do really believe it's all for competition, you know. For the most part, I know Chris Brown and Quavo got their thing going on, so maybe theirs might be a little more personal, but for the most part, I think everything is competition. Shoot, even Lupe Fiasco got on stage and was like, he reminded the entire population that he has smoke for anybody who tries him. So, again, I think once again, a moment that just started with a simple flick of a Kendrick Lamar domino has gradually produced a domino effect for rappers unleashing their competitive fire. So whatever it leads to, I'm all for it. But like I said, even with that in mind, I hope we're able to see the mature decision that J. Cole made. Like I said, I don't think this means he's going to be any less competitive in the future or anything like that. I think this is the learning moment from him on how to balance his maturity and the competition that comes with hip hop. Like it's a lot of to me, it's just a dope situation for him, and I was proud of him. I was proud of him. But of course, a lot of conversations have started because of this short-lived Kendrick versus J. Cole moment, and I want to know what your thoughts are. Right? I again, this was a pretty long verse, a pretty long first topic from me, so I really would like to read and see your thoughts on this. Whether you comment on anything I said or just the situation in general, I would love to hear a different opinion and whatnot. Be sure to leave a reply down below if you're watching on YouTube, or comment on the socials at Hip to the Games to share your thoughts with me, as I'd love to see what you think as well. Like I said, a hefty verse one is down, and we just warming up on this side, as always, as I want to keep it hip hop and actually kind of stay on topic for verse two and touch on Drake's use of AI technology to record his response to Kendrick Lamar. But before that, if you like what you're hearing on Hip to the Games and you want to know how you can show some support to the show, here's how you can do that. As a fan of Hip to the Games, not only should you show your love for the podcast, but you gotta express your love for basketball and hip hop. With a wide variety of clothing and accessories, there is always a way to show how much the game of basketball and the game of rap means to you. Let everybody know what it means to be hip to the games by clicking the link in the episode's description to cop some merch and represent the H2DG lifestyle. All right, welcome back to the newest episode of Hip to the Games, as we're going to get into verse two, our first climax or rising action, if you will. And I want to talk about how Drake used AI, Tupac, and Snoop to record his response to Kendrick Lamar. All right. So, as I previously mentioned, Drake took a little bit of time to deliver his response to Kendrick Lamar's shots, which with what he called the tailor-made freestyle. And what I thought was funny is that people were starting to doubt if Drake would even respond in the first place. I think some of it came from his loss versus Pusha T a few years back, right? They were probably like, Drake don't even want no parts. I saw so many memes and stuff like that of everybody saying like, yeah, Drake ain't gonna respond. But my thing was like, would you rather have a well thought out response or a rushed one? And I think you got to remember everybody's different too. Ice Cube wasted no time dropping No Vaseline, right? Yet Nas took months to drop Ether, right? Two songs that are still among the best diss tracks ever, right? Ice Cube didn't take his time, Nas did, and they're still both great, right? So everybody's different. I know we live in a time though where we want everything quick, but like it's okay to give rappers time to process their emotions and their thoughts and write. That's just my 2 cents on that. But more importantly, Drake's response quickly got real once the spookier, almost Tupac Hail Mary-esque beginning to the instrumental was beneath rhymes recorded by Tupac. And, as you kept listening, you realized this was not just some vocals for added hype. This was an actual verse. And, I got to preface this. I guess I should preface this verse by uh, reminding you of two things. Number one, Tupac is my number one. My favorite MC all time. One of my first few episodes of this show included one that was specifically about him, right? I was still just getting started on my podcast journey, and I just decided to do an episode on an artist that I've studied a lot and been inspired by a lot. So huge fan. And number two, I am anti AI. The only AI we care about is Allen Iverson. Shout out to my guy Andre Iguodala though. That's my guy. But yes, AI was always Allen Iverson growing up, right? And I believe long term, AI is going to pollute real artistry in some form or fashion. So those two things I want to get out the way. That said, when Drake dropped this, I thought it was quite the chess move. I thought it was quite the chess move. I was impressed, in all honesty. Now, obviously, you could tell that was Drake. If you really listen to the song, you could tell that was Drake's pen through and through. I know there were some people complaining that it didn't fit Pac's style and all that, which is true, right? Because if you're gonna use AI like that, you better know how to do it right, right? Like you would rather it be Pac's full uh energy and style of rap and all those things, but at the same time, you can't replicate that, right? He was his own person. Nobody's gonna be able to replicate that, AI or not, right? Um, but I don't think that was the point, right? Like the same thing with how he used Snoop in this as well, right? I think Drake's main point was the mental aspect. He was more focused on like the mental side of this battle, right? Again, that's how you know it's competition because Drake was like, nah, let me hit him with this, right? It wasn't like, oh, let me rap with Tupac and Snoop. It was like, nah, let me kind of flip it on Kendrick, right? Because let me use two West Coast legends to diss a modern day West Coast legend. Was it realistic? Heck no. But it was the little things, right? Pac saying, the dawn rises again before his verse, right? And even down to Snoop saying, nephew, right? Like Drake was playing mind games here. That entire song was Drake's sentiments, his bars, but he created this scenario that was going to get major clicks, responses, eyebrows raised, the whole nine. Just when you thought he wouldn't respond, he did this. To me, that's a dope response. That's a dope response. From an entertainment perspective, that is an incredibly dope response. From a chess move kind of standpoint, it was nice, right? I can't lie. I know in the recent years I haven't been as high on Drake, but to me, like this was solid. Not great, not whack. Just it was a real solid punch, especially with the mind games. Because notice, knowing Drake wrote and rapped this whole thing. Tupac's part in that song, and really Snoop's too, but Tupac's part in that song was almost like what B Rabbit did in his last battle in 8 Mile, right? Because Drake was essentially dissing himself, right? Instigating himself, saying, like, yo, you gonna let a light-skinned Canadian beat you? Right? But he used Tupac almost as in like a haunting way towards Kendrick, like a ghost whispering in his ear. Like to me, Drake is like, okay, you next in line, right? You the next West Coast icon, right? Like they say you got the same spirit as Pac, right? Show me then. And then he used Pac's voice to drive that idea home. That's just crazy. That's crazy. And I think it's the same for Snoop's verse, right? Drake used them to essentially confront Kendrick Lamar to see if he's really the beast he's hyped up to be, right? Like Drake is almost saying, "Yes, respond to me. If you really top dog, respond to me." Right? I think from a competition standpoint, like I said, I loved it. It was interesting and entertaining to listen to, and I think quality wise, it may not have been the best, as Drake's main idea was just pushing Kendrick to get in the booth, right? He had some jabs here and there. But the main point that stood out to me was like, yo, what are you waiting for? If it's really bump the big three, it's just big me, you would have responded right now. Right. But again, he's doing this as the voice of Pac, as the voice of Snoop. Right. So Drake's clearly instigating. Right. And like I said before, it's all competition. I just think these guys are laughing at each other, enjoying the moment, probably behind closed doors. I don't think Kendrick is in a rush to response. Part of me even feels like Kendrick may never respond just because it's like off the strength of like, I know who I am. Like I know I'm great. Like I put my stuff down. I meant what I said, and I'm not going to give you fools any time of day. But of course, I think the hip hop competition, right? I think even in the midst of Kendrick Lamar probably being unbothered, he is going to respond because, I'm kind of on both sides, right? I think he'll respond out of the competition and love of hip hop, but at the same time, he's secure with himself to know that like, I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying y'all going crazy over a few bars I had on a feature, right? Like I said, once again, Kendrick did what he did in 2013. But you know, it's just interesting to see that if he does respond to this, how he'll respond, especially knowing what Drake just did with AI and everything. But then, you know, that leads me to the other side of this conversation, right? The use of AI, AI in music, because I think that's the tough thing about this. As creative and entertaining as this was from Drake, did he open the other door for rappers to try this? You know, it's crazy because when you look at the lyrics to Taylor Made on Genius, it says verse one, Tupac in parentheses, AI. And I was like, dang, is this what it's going to be now? Like, are we going to get Blueface featuring Tupac, parentheses, AI, right? AI Biggie, AI Big Pun, AI Big L. You know, I think a very important thing to consider is the respect factor, especially when dealing with artists who have passed on, because Drake seemed to ignore that respect factor, you know, especially when it came to AI Tupac, right? The Tupac estate already issued a statement. They already issued a cease and desist to Drake because he used Pac's voice. And, you know, they even said in that statement, like, we respect Kendrick. He's a friend to us. Like, we're not with this at all. Right. So Drake knew that neither the Tupac estate or Snoop would actually be down for this. So he couldn't, it's not like he could get permission to do this because he knew they'd say no. And you know, that's the whack thing about AI is that unless your voice is copyrighted, it doesn't matter if you get a blessing from an artist or their family or you know, whoever before using their voice. You know, so Drake definitely lose some like respect points for that, right? When it comes to respect. But to my original point, it will be interesting to see what direction this goes because Drake, again, as big of an artist as he is, because he did this, you know, trust and believe somebody else is going to try it next. And it's going to get real scary when it comes from somebody who actually studies the artist's flow, delivery, cadence, overall style, how they rap, and executes it so well it sounds real. Right? If I can make an analogy, I think it's like leaving your door or window open on a nice day, right? Like you want cool air to flow through, but you might let a fly or two in. And I think that's where we are with AI and music. Because on one hand, you know, somebody might be doing something real dope, real creative. They might execute a nice idea, but on the other hand, somebody's going to abuse it, right? Drake did something pretty creative here, right? That's the cool air flowing through. But then again, the flies are going to start coming in, right? We're going to get people saying, oh, let me do a Tupac feature like Drake did. Probably going to be a 5 out of 10 song, but oh, it's got a Tupac AI feature. And then, you know, like now everybody's going to start using it and abusing it, you know, and like, like I said, especially dealing with deceased artists, like, is somebody going to be that hungry to execute what they think will be dope in exchange for human decency and respect for somebody's family? You know, even worse, what if they use AI for the voice and the rhymes? Then where is your respect for the art of rap that you couldn't even craft the rhymes? You know, Drake might have done something cool here, but, you know, he risks bringing in a lot of flies by opening that door. But see, again, then there's a whole nother side to this, right? Because then you think of artists like the DOC or Beanie Siegel, right? Guys whose voices have changed as a result of events in their lives. You know, so it would actually be cool, very cool, and acceptable for them to use AI for their old voice if they wanted to, because it's still them, right? And I know that's been a conversation that's been had on social media, especially with those two rappers I named, right? Or even think about this, right? For a very recent example, think about this. Eminem just announced this Death of Slim Shady album, right? Imagine if he used AI to replicate the young Slim Shady voice, and then he does like a Marshall versus Shady record. I think that would be pretty dope too. And again, another example of acceptable use of AI. You know, I think it's just some things to think about, you know, as we head into an AI acceptable world. You know, my stance is the same. As long as you ain't using it to write your rhymes, using it to drop a whole Tupac album, you know, using it to gain the riches that come with rap, I guess it's cool, right? You know, my thing is just I want the art to stay natural, you know, because best believe the more it becomes AI becomes more acceptable, the higher chances that somebody is going to abuse it. And you know, for example, right, there might be a 12-year-old ready to use AI rhymes and take ODB's voice and make a rap career and never show his face. Right? Like that, I feel like that's extreme case, right? Sometimes I get worst case scenario brain. It happens sometimes, but like I feel like that's something we gotta fear when it comes to AI in music. So again, Drake may have done something interesting given the scenario of rap beef, but this can't become the norm. Like I said, you because it is gonna open up doors for people to just mindlessly be like, oh, let me get a big pun feature. Let me get a big pun feature. Let me get a big L feature, a biggie feature. Like the again, and you expect that like these estates and everything like that, like they're probably gonna start in the process of like copywriting these artists' voice. So like things just get deleted automatically or however it goes, when people try these things, then that can help clean it up a little bit. But yeah, like I said, so I just know it happens with technology all the time, right? Something drops and it's really cool, but then something else happens that's kind of like we let a fly in, right? We on the one hand we got this, but on the other hand something bad happened. So I think that's where we're at, and I think honestly that's what Drake did by using AI, Tupac, and Snoop. I feel like I said a little bit of a mouthful here with this conversation though, but what are your thoughts on AI and hip hop slash rap? Is it possible that it can be done well? Or is it all bad? All right, let me know what you think because I know it's a hot topic as technology continues to evolve. But we got two verses down now and one more to go as I want to flip to the other side of the H2DG spectrum to give some updated playoff thoughts as the first round series are all well underway. But before we get into that, here's one way you can choose to rep your team during their playoff run. Or maybe you're like me and have to start cheering for next year already. Either way, this is how you could do that. The 2023-24 NBA season is here, and there's no better time to cop the flyest and authentic merch to rep your squad. If you're looking for the ultimate destination for NBA gear to rep the home team, look no further than the NBA store. With an extensive selection of authentic and high-quality products like jerseys, hats, and accessories, the NBA store has everything you need to express yourself. Word to NWA. And with an online presence, it becomes even easier to shop from anywhere in the world. Don't miss out on the latest trends and experiences. Visit the NBA store today by clicking the affiliate link in this episode's description. Hip to the Games is working in affiliation with the NBA store and will be compensated for your patronage by utilizing the link provided. I sincerely thank you for all your support. All right, welcome back to Hip to the Games, where we're going to get into our final verse for today's episode, the hardest one for last. More playoff thoughts. All right. Last but certainly not the least, I had to give some more updated playoff thoughts as these first round series are well underway. Even kind of on the brink of being over for some of these teams. I'm sure as the time this episode drops, some of these teams that I'll speak about will be out of the playoffs. But right now I just want to give some kind of like rapid fire-esque thoughts on all the teams and matchups involved. So I really want to start off with this Lakers versus Nuggets thing. A rematch of last year's conference finals. Anthony Davis said on Media Day how they were anxious to get a chance to see them again because they got swept, right? Yet fast forward to now, history almost repeated itself. Now, don't get me wrong. Anthony Davis had a heck of a season this year. He almost played every game. He played extremely well this series. 30-point double doubles for the most part. Like he's doing his thing, right? And still on the verge of getting swept, right? LeBron has been very good as well. Still on the verge of getting swept. And I think just simply put, they're not as good as Denver. They're not as good as Denver. And we knew that already. But the thing that gets me with this series is how did this same Laker team show up more hungry for an in-season tournament than the NBA playoffs? Like, sure, the in-season tournament came with the extra financial bonus, right? Sure, they were healthier, right? But you would think they would have at least got one win versus Denver, and thankfully they did indeed do that by winning Game 4. But this series, it really just seemed like AD and LeBron are doing their thing, but the role players aren't, right? D'Lo was struggling mightily until Game 4. Austin Reeves, he's been pretty solid, but I think I would like to see a little more consistency from him. But I just think down the line, not much is going right for the Lakers, and I fear that Darvin Ham's rotational decisions are the reason they found themselves in such a hole. All year I've seen this to be an issue for the Lakers with these three guard rotations. Like it's been a mess. it just doesn't work for them. And I think even when they won the championship, right? Like they had bigs. You had Anthony Davis, Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee, right? Like you had guys on that team. And you could put AD at the four, right? He didn't have to play the five. The Lakers pride themselves on size and even wing, right? Size, immense size at the wings and the 4 or 5 spots. And I think that's why they were able to win. So when they don't have a team like that, they play some of their worst basketball, especially when you're doing the opposite and you're playing 3 guard lineups. Right? I know we're in the small ball era, but it just don't work for a team like them. And like I said, I just feel for Darvin Ham because, being the head coach for the Los Angeles Lakers is a huge responsibility. And you don't get as long of a grace period there as you might with other franchises. So he might be on the hot seat if he hasn't been there already. But of course, you just simply got to tip your hat to the well-oiled machine that is the Denver Nuggets, right? They ain't perfect. They lost a game, but they've been in control of this series. Even though it's funny, like I think I seen the stat where it's like the Lakers have been up like every game this series, yet they were down 3-0 before winning game 4. So like I think that just shows how well oiled the Nuggets are. And unfortunately it's not looking good for the Lakers right now. And in some ways you're just not surprised by that. It seems like their regular season struggles have carried on to the playoffs. So that's my thoughts on that series. And then there's Minnesota versus Phoenix. The Timberwolves have looked immensely hungry, energized, and quite honestly, much more like a team, unlike the Phoenix Suns. I think that's what we all expected, right? Like the Suns, they're struggling to create sustainable offense despite having their 3 stars. You'll see the Timberwolves, they'll mix in pick and roll, spot ups, post ups, cutting. And then the Suns simply are just looking for KD, Beal, Booker, do something, right? And it just hasn't worked. Your turn, my turn basketball does not work in the NBA playoffs. I don't care if it's the year 2024. I don't care if it's the year 1984. Man, I know in year 3004, you are still going to need a sustainable team to win NBA playoff games. Your turn, my turn basketball will not work. And I think what makes it even worse is that they lost their best 3-point shooter, right? Really the best 3-point shooter in the NBA this season, Grayson Allen, to injury. So like they're in trouble, you know. And I think what they're going through, again, I say, is just a reminder that that kind of basketball it's fine for the regular season. It'll put fans in the seats. It'll get your ratings, right? You might win 50 games. You might even win 50 games. But when it comes to the playoffs and you are being game planned and the stakes increase, right? Stakes is high, word de la soul. You know what I'm saying? When the stakes is high, the fans are louder, the defenses are tighter, it's trouble for you. And the Suns are running into that right now. They have nobody on that roster that knows how to control games. If anything, it's Isaiah Thomas. And even then, he's a score first guard, right? So, and Frank Vogel isn't even playing him. So, like, the sun is setting very fast in Phoenix. And on the other side, Minnesota, they look really ready to get out the first round. And, how about Anthony Edwards, man? I mean, homie was ready for his moment and he was shining, especially in that game 1 performance. It's been fun to see, especially as the last time the Minnesota crowd was rocking like that was probably 2004. So it's dope to see this team and these fans have a good series, and it'll be exciting to see how they fare versus a team like the Nuggets, the same team, pretty much the same team, might I add, that knocked them out last season. So I know if you thought Anthony Edwards was energized to face the Phoenix Suns and show KD that like, hey, move out the way, I'm coming. I can only imagine what he's got in store for a team like Denver. So that should be a very good second round series that we're approaching. And then I want to move into the Mavs and Clippers series. Because last episode rather, I had a whole verse dedicated to this series. And for the most part, things seem to be going how I thought, right? The Mavericks look hungrier than ever, which I expected. But what and I think many of us didn't expect was how well the Mavericks have been defending. They've been packing the paint. If you notice, they'll send 3, sometimes even 4 bodies in the paint, collapsing anything the Clippers have tried to do. I mean, there's been times where, like, man, and forgive me, I don't have enough experience with the X's and O's, and everything like that. So if I explain it kind of elementary, that's why. But the way I see it is like the Mavericks are collapsing the driving lanes, especially for Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. and so that they're forcing the other players to drive. It looks like they're okay with a Westbrook driving because sometimes Russ is looking to drive and kick, not even drive and finish. Um, Same thing with James Harden, right? He'll look to drive and throw a lob or drive and kick to a corner shooter. But when it comes to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, it's just packed. It's packed in the paint. Uh, like Kawhi hasn't even really been able to get into his mid-range game. Paul George has been uh he's had to settle for mid-range shots, right? They haven't been really been able to get to the free throw line because of that. And again, if they want inside buckets, they have to throw it to Zubac. And if they dump off to Zubac, the Mavericks are literally just throwing three guards down there to strip it and hack and force Zubac to give it up, right? Like the Mavericks are playing tough, right? And again, what I just said, it sounds like they're fouling and whatnot, but like, no, they're actually doing it pretty, like they're playing stiff, physical, good playoff defense. And again, I really want to shout out PJ Washington in particular. That dude has played terrific defense on Paul George since from the jump, and really whoever he's on. He's blocking shots. He's playing stiff defense, just stonewalling his matchups. Daniel Gafford has been exceptional in the paint. Like this team has just been on the same page on both ends, right? And I think, I felt like in games 2 and 3, Kyrie Irving did a great job, a fantastic job of showing what a Dallas Mavericks team looks like when you pair Luka Doncic with an exceptional talent like him. I mean, when Luka sits, Kyrie hits the momentum swinging shots. When the team needs a bucket, both he and Luka have come through. It's almost like it's really, if I'm honest, it's really what Shaq used to say about him and Kobe, right? There were some games where Shaq would do the jab and Kobe would hit the haymaker. And then there were times Kobe would hit the jab, Shaq would come with the haymaker. I've seen that from Luka and Kyrie Irving this series. They look very dangerous right now. If that team continues to defend the way they're defending and just make those late buckets and make those buckets when the game gets tight, when they just let Kyrie and Luka go to work and they actually come through, it's really dangerous. They are going to be extremely dangerous to stop because their formula is just working right now. Um, and I tried to tell you last episode, man, the Mavs ain't trying to lose again, and we see that in their energy this year. And I think this is the year they do it. I mean, I'm not sure if the Clippers have it in them to overcome this team. It's unfortunate because the Clippers, I felt like they had a nice energy to them to start the season. Then they hit that low point, but then boom, they like took off again, and they were really looking like a championship favorite. But man, they've really been looking every bit of like their older age right now. Um, like I said, both Paul George and Kawhi Leonard look like they've lost some fight now that they're older. Like I was watching game 3 and I was like, Kawhi doesn't even look like the Kawhi that like wants to win a game, a playoff game. And Paul George, yeah, granted in game 3 he was in foul trouble, but I'm like, nobody looks like they want to take over. Like, and there was a really lengthy part of the game where it was like Ivica Zubac and Norman Powell were responsible for all the points, right? Like that alarmed me because I'm like, again, I know Kawhi kind of hobbled a little bit. I know Paul George is older. Harden, he's hit some big shots this series, but he's older, right? Russ is older. Like they just don't seem to have that same pop and energy. And that's something I'm very curious to see if that's something that goes away or if that's something that's like just they're gonna throw in the towel, like nah, like it's not our league anymore. It's time for the next generation to get there. So because my thing, man, is like, again, in reference to game 3, ain't no way Paul George and Kawhi Leonard should combine for 14 points heading into the fourth quarter and your team is down. And y'all are just walking up the court like it's a regular season game. Ain't no way your best two players should be playing like that in the NBA playoffs. And this team will really need to wake up or else they will be on vacation early, right? Like they will be looking at forward to the Intuit Dome much sooner rather than later. Game 4 is actually starting in a little bit as at the time of me recording this episode. So by the time this episode drops, we'll know if the Clippers were able to bounce back or start thinking about next year. Because like I said, the Mavericks are coming and they look dangerous. And then to end the Western Conference, there's OKC versus the New Orleans Pelicans. And my thoughts on the Pelicans haven't aged that well. If you remember anything about last episode, I hope you got a little amnesia about that because I've certainly tried to. Um, but Zion Williamson got hurt in that first playing game, and he hasn't played since. So as you can imagine, OKC has had their number as the number one seed, as they should. But and what I love is that OKC's youth, it hasn't been an issue. Everybody looks just as poised as they did in the regular season, and that's a great sign. Shea Gilgeous is doing his thing. Chet is holding down the paint. Everything is clicking. Especially if they face Dallas next, though. That's gonna be a fun series. Because they may it's easy to look good versus a Pelicans team without their best player. But the Mavericks would be up some levels, especially with the momentum they've carried so far. So it would be nice to see how this OKC team looks versus a better team. Because clearly the Pelicans, they've struggled without Zion. I think even Brandon Ingram just doesn't he knows. It's like you could see it in his face. Like he's got to carry a lot of the load that and he hasn't necessarily done the best job of that. And in the playoffs, you need your stars to be stars in these moments. And unfortunately, the Pelicans have been on the wrong side of that. Hopefully they can get one of these at home, but it just hasn't been looking great. As health unfortunately continues to be their defining factor towards the end of the season and the playoffs. So again, it looks like the Pelicans are going to have another early exit. And they're gonna have some decisions to make. Do they kind of retool that team? Do you trade guys like CJ, Brandon Ingram, and get some other stars to go with Zion? Like what it's interesting to see what they're gonna do because again, they just keep hitting this wall year after year, and you got to think at some point change is gonna come. But shout out to OKC. It's good to see them back in the playoffs. Those fans roaring playing well and everything like that. They're again, much like Minnesota, much like Dallas, I believe like this team is just getting started with their playoff run. All right, and switching it to the Eastern Conference, let's start with Miami and Boston. Uh, how cool is it that after last year's Eastern Conference Finals loss, the Celtics get to see Miami out the gate in round one? But unfortunately, Jimmy Butler tore his MCL and is likely not returning. So we don't get to see again another star we don't get to see in the playoffs, unfortunately. But even then, the Heat managed to split the series 1-1 within the first two games. And I think that's what I meant last episode, man, when I said the Celtics had to stop playing with their food. Don't get me wrong. Boston, they did bounce back in this game three. And Eric Spoelstra, he's seen this team a lot over the years. He's a great coach. And it's not surprising that they found a way to steal a game on the road without Jimmy. But, even though Tatum and Brown are doing their thing, have been doing their thing, Drew Holiday's got to play better. And Kristaps Porzingis has to be better on the glass. Single digit points for Drew Holiday in every game this series so far. And 4, 5 rebounds from Porzingis, that ain't gonna cut it in the playoffs. And this is what I was saying before. They have to be aggressive and make statements because heading into the opposing team's arena, tied is not what you want. Like I said, granted, they won game three. Cool. They won by 20. But they seem to get their groove back. But again, Drew Holiday, single digit points. And I guess that's the great sign with Boston. Drew Holiday, you're getting single digit points. Kristaps Porzingis is getting you single digit rebounds at 7'2" or 3 or whatever he is, and you're still finding ways to win games by 20. So imagine how much better you can still play and you're still dominating this team. Right. But again, it is the Miami Heat without their best player. So it's like when you're facing these better teams, when you get into the semifinals, the conference finals, and should they make the NBA finals, that's not going to cut it. So again, Boston, they got to work out some kinks, but they're doing their thing, but they got to work out some kinks, especially because these rounds are going to get tougher as they advance. They need to keep their foot on the neck. My energy is still the same from last episode. The Boston Celtics need to keep their foot on the neck and maybe listen to Many Men by 50 Cent, like I said. But that's what makes it an entertaining series. Without a guy like Jimmy, the Heat are still showing heart and things of that nature. Game two, Tyler Hero showed up with 24 points, 14 assists. Bam and Caleb Martin have stepped up. Like they've even got solid contributions from Nikola Jovic, uh, Jaime Jaquez, Haywood Highsmith, even like the Heat, they know how to collectively win games. You know what I'm saying? So it's good to see them. But like I said, the Celtics look like they played with them a little bit, but they seem like they're going to get into high gear eventually. So And they even have their role players, right? Like Sam Hauser, Peyton Pritchard. They got guys as well. So, even if this iteration of Celtics versus Heat is a bit different, it's still been pretty entertaining. And it's good to see a team like Miami still play with poise and heart without their star. But like I said, the Celtics, as they continue to work out the kinks, again, their playoff run is just getting started. Because again, they're going to beat their say they move on and they beat this team. Everybody's going to be like, well, you did it without they didn't have Jimmy. So right, and then the next round is going to be like almost like the first round, right? In the sense of like Boston has to show us how good they are, because it's easy to beat a team when they don't have their star, right? So I again, Boston, I'm chilling on them. I'm gonna chill on them. I'm gonna let them do their thing. All right. All right, and then we're moving on to the 4 versus 5 matchup that is Orlando versus Cleveland. Ooh, this series right here, I felt like this series has went under the radar because the games have been on NBA TV. But I figured the Magic they would get at least one at home. But even better, they have tied the series in 2 statement home games. In the first 2 games, it looked like the Cavs showed to kind of rebound from last year and their playoff disappointment. They were seeming to respond with high energy, physicality. That right, they looked a little bit more prepared for the physicality that comes with the playoffs. Of course, Donovan Mitchell, he's no stranger to this, so he was doing that thing where he doesn't miss a shot no matter how many hands are in his face. So Cleveland, they would turn out there in Cleveland, and they had much of the control with the first 2 games. Really old school first 2 games too, right? Like I think the Magic were a bit playoff struck. Not many guys on that roster have had playoff experience, and I think that showed. And then when you combine that with the limited amount of 3-point shooting that they have, it makes sense that they didn't even score 90 points the first 2 games. They're a great defensive team, so they also did a good job holding the Cavs under 100, even though they lost both games. But again, the Magic they struggle to score at times, so they couldn't even get to 90 in this era of basketball, which is kind of saying something. But it's like a flip just switched, and they got home. They went back to warm weather in Orlando, and probably went to Disney World or something like that. And man, game 3 they turned up. Not only did they have they held the Cavs to 83 points, their lowest of the series, but suddenly the Magic erupted for 121 points. Again, much like Minnesota, it was nice to see a team like that get a dominant playoff win at home. Paolo had a monster game, 31, 14, and 5. Jalen Suggs dropped 24. Lots of guys got on the board in that game. But man, something I'm still watching, and this was something I mentioned last year too. Darius Garland, like he hasn't scored 20 yet this series. He was held to just 5 points in game 3. It seems like he doesn't shine as much come playoff time, and I haven't really been able to catch the game. So like I don't know if he's just succumbing to being blitzed, with the pick and rolls and things of that nature. Is it just him being a smaller guard? Like, I don't really know what's going on, or it just a credit to the Magic defense. Granted, Donovan Mitchell does a lot of the scoring damage, but after last year, I was kind of waiting for Darius Garland to respond and play at that all-star level that he's capable of playing at. So that's something I'm still going to keep my eye on, even if they advance beyond this series. But overall, this series, like I said, it's a bit more old school, and I love it. I really do. And even after the big comeback the Magic just made, right? Like they were down double digits, and then they ended up winning by 20. Like crazy game. A dominant performance this time from Franz Wagner. Like they got their fire back. So I wonder, is this going to be a tale of teams that only know how to win at home, and then we're going to have a game 7, right? Is this going to be our one series, or maybe 2 series that gets to 7 games, or are the Magic going to turn up and find a way to win on the road? Like this is an exciting point. When teams are tied at 2, it's always exciting because nobody really has the momentum. So like I said, I think this series just got extremely interesting, especially after these last 2 games in Orlando. And then up next, we got Bucks versus Pacers. One of the more, at least what I thought would be one of the more exciting series, in my opinion, as especially after Damian Lillard pretty much single-handedly leading the Bucks to a game 1 victory. But then Pascal Siakam did his thing. He led the charge in game 2 for Indy, and then in game 3, it was pretty much up and down. As the Pacers were up much of the first half, but then the Bucks started winning towards the end. And then before Tyrese Halliburton had to seal the deal with the and one, coming in the clutch late in overtime. Nice big moment for him. I mean, I think the Bucks at this point, they're definitely hurting not having Giannis Antetokounmpo, and now they'll just continue to hurt even more not having Damian Lillard due to his Achilles strain. It isn't looking good for Milwaukee at all. And I feel for this team because again, they acquired Damian Lillard through trade, and everybody, myself included, is thinking championship at this point. They acquired Pat Bev at the deadline, and even he has been vocal on his podcast, like he's just itching for a championship, and he really felt like he could do it this year with Milwaukee, and now their best players are out. So it's not looking good. It's looking like they're gonna have to put their focus on next year. Because without Giannis's two-way presence, they were already kind of struggling. Now, when you pair that with losing Dame's scoring ability and everything like that, um, it's just going to give Indy even more reason to run away with the series. Pun intended, because they be out there running, run and gun offense. They've been able to show that they can control the pace and tempo. The same thing that's made them successful all year. You got to think they got a little lucky, with the injuries because their style of play isn't really playoff basketball. But they're making it work with this series in particular. I want to shout out Chris Middleton. He erupted in game 3, hence why the Bucks almost won. But you got to think that Indy's depth and youth has helped them overcome the Bucks. Again, the Pascal Siakam pickup is showing to be tremendous for them. Miles Turner continues to do his thing as a face-up big man. Like Indy's got some pieces over there. We knew that. Um, and you just can't mad at them. You can't get mad at them for taking advantage of the injuries that the Bucks have suffered from. Because honestly, like I said, the Pacers, they're not necessarily a playoff team on paper. The way they play isn't necessarily what you want going into the playoffs. But Dame can't do it by himself, and Indy's going to take advantage of that. And they've lived up to their name, right? The Pacers, they've lived up to their name, and it's working so far. But like I said, I think it's working this series, right? They have to stay locked in because it's working this series. Due to the unfortunate circumstances with the Bucks, the Indiana Pacers should cruise to the next round to face either the Knicks or Sixers, and they don't want to. They don't want to. You can't sleep with those two teams either. So that actually leads me to the next matchup: the Knicks and Sixers, Atlantic Division rivalry. They seem to be in a similar state, right? The Knicks were able to win 2 sloppy games at home despite Jalen Brunson's shooting struggles, which is always a good sign when your best player is shooting bad and you can still find a way to win. Again, I feared Philly would lose momentum having to come from the play-in and then dealing with Joel Embiid's little hobbled injuries and whatnot. And that looked like the case after the first 2 games. Technically, you would think that they should be up 2-1 because of that heartbreaking game 2 loss, where just, a 50-50 ball turned into a 3-point shot for the Knicks, right? So, and gave them the lead late. So you would have to think that the Sixers, they hate that they lost that one. Um, but then again, you could argue that the Knicks should have been up 3-0 because, right, they had some slip ups in game 3. So to me, like these are two teams who they play great at home, but the road games are always the real test, right? They have great fans. Everybody, you love playing in an environment like Philly. You love playing in the Garden, especially come playoff time. But the real test is the road games, and neither team has really been able to show so far at the time of this recording that they've been able to do that. I think it was good to see Jalen Brunson bounce back in game 3. Yet the Sixers finally won a game when Joel Embiid dropped 50. So you can't help but be like, dang, he got to drop 50 for them to win, even with Tyrese Maxey out there. I think that's a testament to the Knicks being a better overall team than Philly. It seems as though not having Julius Randle has indeed been a blessing in disguise for them. Don't get me wrong; it always hurts to lose an all-star like him. However, without his presence, the ball is actually moving more how it's supposed to. They aren't limited in the half court. And, even with Jalen Brunson struggling to shoot, they have the personnel to grind out wins. On the flip side, I think that's why Philly is struggling. They don't have that. What's going on with Tobias Harris, right? Like Buddy Hield. Why is Buddy Hield? I'm looking at the box scores. He's playing single digit minutes, and I'm doing my research and I'm seeing that he's been in a slump for a little bit now, and it's just taking a toll on his minutes. Even though he's on a great day, he's one of the best shooters in the league. Like it makes you think that he should have just stayed in Indy, right? Because none of that is helping Philly, right? When your role player, again, it's the playoffs, man. Your star and Philly is on the other side of that, right? Like I mentioned earlier that your stars have to be stars, like your role players can't do everything, right? But I think the Philly is experiencing the opposite, right? Tyrese Maxey can do his thing, MB can do his thing, but those other guys have to step up. They have to supplement the stars in the playoffs, and I think that's why Philly is struggling. You know, they have pieces. Don't get me wrong; they have good pieces, but I just don't think they are as locked in and as solid and firm on a firm foundation that the guys in New York have right now. All that said, though, it's been a close series, and I think it's going to be quite the grind to see who comes out on top. If I'm honest, I'm leaning more towards the Knicks right now. It looks like they're going to be the ones to come out the series, but again, they're playoff basketball, baby. It's a series. It's the first to four. So we'll see what Philly can do if they can make a comeback. But right now, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the Knicks advance right now. But like I said, things can change. Like I always say, we shall see. So some solid first round matchups we've had so far. I think there are some things that are going as expected. Other series have brought some surprises. It will be exciting to see how this goes as the postseason continues. But, a little side note here, too. How crazy is it that guys like Steph, KD, LeBron, Kawhi, PG, Russ, Harden, these guys might all be out of the first round if they even made the playoffs at all? Like, it's crazy to see the Warriors missing the playoffs entirely despite actually being healthy, right? Kawhi, he doesn't, like I said, he doesn't have the same go get a bucket attitude he had in previous years. He's running into nothing but Mavs jerseys. Paul George, he's tried to dunk on Daniel Gafford like 5 times already this series, and he's gotten blocked each time. It's like he's not even going to dunk. He's going in hoping to dunk, right? I mean, man, KD and the Suns are struggling. It's really looking like the end of an era, right? And it's one, again, in your mid-20s, it's one thing when we saw Iverson retire and Kobe and Duncan and Shaq and KG and Dirk and D Wade. But man, now that these guys, right, who I just named, KD and all those guys, now that these guys who we've seen their whole careers from start to finish can actually remember their whole careers from start to finish, they're getting eliminated and even outplayed by the younger guys. It's just crazy to watch. Like, you see me clutching my chest. It is crazy to watch. It's one of those things, I be wanting to ask my OG sometimes, like, man, how did y'all do it? how did y'all feel when Magic didn't, what I'm saying, was out the league and Larry Bird was old age? Like, cause wow, man, like these is really an end of an era, the basketball that I really came up with in my preteen, like my teenage years, is like ending. I knew it would happen, of course, but that didn't mean I'd be ready for it. You know what I'm saying? If you feel how I feel, you know what I'm saying? You might understand. If you're around my age, like I know you feel me. And if you're older, please help those of us in our mid-20s cope with seeing our favorite players age/retire. Because seeing and everybody going out in pretty much the same time like this is just my 13-year-old self, inner child can't take it. But man, the playoffs continue to roll. These first round series have been wild, and I can't wait to see how the next ones look. Again, I tried so hard this week to have a dog of the week for you, but I didn't know who to choose. Jamal Murray had a doggish game winner. Jalen Brunson had some doggish performances, but he shot bad. Anthony Edwards, he almost got it, but then he followed up with a 15-point performance. Embiid, that's a doggish 50-point game, right? But they're down in the series. You see what I'm saying? Like, so I've had some trouble picking somebody. If I, like I said, if I really wanted to pick an underrated one, I would say PJ Washington. Like, again, for nobody expected the Mavericks to play good defense, but he's been incredible, man. He's been incredible. But I'm still kind of struggling with that. Like I said, I'm still waiting on somebody to do something like real doggish, what I'm saying, playoff level type stuff. But hey, if you think I'm tripping and you said, no, Des, this person should have been the dog of the week. You want to campaign for somebody? Please hit the socials, leave a comment on YouTube. Please let me know who I should watch out for. they could very well pop up in the next episode, or even if I just decide to maybe post something on social media about it, I'll even shout you out if they end up getting picked, if you campaign for somebody. So I want to leave that out there. But with all that said, of course, that means we've made it to the end of another Hip to the Games episode. From the Kendrick versus J. Cole moment in hip hop to the use of AI in rap/hip hop and the first round of the NBA playoffs. Lots of interesting discussion to be had on these topics, but as always, these were just my thoughts. So I want to hear from you. You can tweet the show at Hip to the Games or tag me directly on Twitter and IG at Desmond Powell _ and share your thoughts on any of the topics discussed today, as I would love to hear or read your thoughts. As always, I want to thank you for being hip to the games, listening to another episode of H2DG, all for the love of the best combo there is. You know how we do. Until next time, peace out and God bless. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Hip to the Games, and if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit up the socials at Desmond Powell _ and at Hip to the Games on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok so you don't miss out on the fun. And please follow or subscribe to the show and leave a review on the podcast platform you're on right now, as your support is greatly appreciated.